Before I begin, I feel it is necessary to point out that the news arm of the BBC has yet to retract, apologize, or otherwise address the deeply transphobic reporting it has engaged in the last few months. In a pinned comment down below, you'll find my original video on the topic, several videos from the YouTuber Sean, who has been ongoing in his pursuit of trying to get the BBC to own up to what they have done, and also a video from Laura Kate Dale showing the protests that have taken place outside of the BBC offices. While I don't feel any of the people behind Doctor Who are in any way responsible for this, I cannot in good conscience talk about a BBC-owned property without mentioning this first, until such time as it is properly redressed. Thank you. Well, given that the upcoming special is going to see the long-awaited return of a classic Doctor Who monster, one of the few recurring ones who has not reappeared in the modern era, let's take a look at their first appearance. That's right, we're talking about the Sea Devils. I was excited to go back and watch this one because this is one that I actually have seen before. I haven't done a review on it before because I watched it. I don't think I even had the channel going up yet. Oh, geez. So like 13 years ago? I've been doing this a long time. But I remember liking it. I remember it being one of the early ones where I was like, ooh, yeah, because I've mentioned before, it took me a little while to kind of click with Classic Who and just sort of adjust my expectations and my way of viewing things because I didn't grow up with this kind of material. So it took me a little while to kind of get into the headspace of this era of sci-fi. So I had great memories of it. I remember thinking the Master was great. I remember thinking that the action scenes were cool. I remember thinking that the Sea Devils were pretty good. Some of that is true. Some of it's a little bit more questionable. So this is a 6-episode long serial, making it a little bit longer than your standard. I feel like I can safely say your standard Doctor Who story was 4 episodes long in terms of the classic era, except for that brief period with Colin Baker where they doubled the length and just made them all 2-part, whatever. Forget that, like you should. But it's a 6-episode story, which makes it a little longer than is standard. And there is reason for that. You always have to kind of worry about longer Doctor Who stories because sometimes it's because the story is more complicated and it's bigger, and sometimes it's because it's padded all to heck. Even the good ones that are that long can be quite padded. Not so much the case here. It does justify its length because it's got 2 major storylines going on. One involving the Master, and then the one involving the Sea Devils. And they do interact. Those stories do overlap. So it's not like they're just happening in conjunction. Why are these in the same space? Like, no. These things matter to each other. The thing that I didn't remember is that the Master material is so much stronger than the Sea Devil stuff. I suspect part of the reason I probably like the Sea Devils more on first viewing, at least to my memory, than I think I did this time, is because I saw this originally before I saw any of the Silurian stuff. I think even before the Silurians had been brought back, I'd seen this. So this whole notion that comes with the Silurians and the Sea Devils, these creatures that have been from Earth's past that now want to reclaim the planet, and the Doctor striving for peace instead of conflict between them and humans, that was something I hadn't seen Doctor Who do yet when I saw this. Now, at this point, having seen it done multiple times and having seen Doctor Who and the Silurians, which is kind of the precursor, this is a pseudo-sequel to in some ways, this element and aspect feels more like a retread. Whereas the Master stuff, it just crackles with energy. Let's just start there. The scenes, the dynamic, the banter between the Doctor, the Master, and Joe Grant. The 3 of them, although it's mostly just the Doctor and the Master together, but when it's the 3 of them in the room or it's just the Doctor and the Master, it is so good. Like, I feel it makes me feel all the more comfortable for ranking Roger Delgado as the best Master because, like, wow, he's good. And he can make that switch from absolute cocky, so sure of himself, he's positive he's going to win, he's positive the Doctor can't ever catch up with him, to anger at things starting to fall apart, frustration at having to align himself with the Doctor because something's gone horribly wrong. He can play that full range and turn on a dime and it's all consistent. He's so good at it. And just the banter between him and Pertwee. I mean, Pertwee's charming anytime. Like that is the thing with Pertwee. I always think of him, he's just charming. And his flow of conversation just in general is great. With the Master, it's perfect. I loved it too, especially when they meet early on, because the Master starts out the story imprisoned. He's in jail. He is being kept an eye on, and the Doctor's just stopping and going, I'm just going to see what he's up to. And the Master's putting on this whole, oh, well, I don't like the fact that I'm locked up, but maybe it's good for me. Gives me time to think about what I've been doing with my life, kind of act. You can tell the Doctor's not really buying it, but at the same time, he's taking the advantage to just be able to have a pleasant conversation with someone who used to be his friend. It's so good. And I also, I'm not going to say that I never got the appeal of Joe Grant. I've never disliked Joe Grant. What I will say, though, is that a lot of people have a lot higher degree of reverence and nostalgia for Joe Grant than I've generally had. I suspect part of that has to do with just what a absolute ball of sunshine Katie Manning was and continues to be, so far as I can tell. But I'll say this story in particular gave me a better appreciation of Joe Grant, not just for the token reasons that she actually just gets to kick a little butt and have a couple of action moments, which is nice, but it's the rapport between her and Pertwee. They are so perfectly synchronized. They get each other so well that they can just look at each other and be like, we doing this? Oh, we're doing this. Like, it feels like there's a conversation going on between them that is just looks, and they have wonderful chemistry. It's fantastic, and it's better exemplified here than the other Joe Grant stories that I've seen so far. It's perfectly captured. I love seeing them together. I love seeing the Master with the Doctor. I like the Master on his own. And there's actually plenty of supporting characters here that are either interesting in and of themselves or who serve their purposes really well. Like there's a character who shows up later what is he? The parliamentary private secretary, something. This political douchebag, like as soon as he walks in the room. And actually this is almost slight. There's an obvious part of it and there's a slightly subtle part of it. And I appreciated both. On the one hand, there's the blatantly obvious part of it, which is he is here to supersede the naval officers on the base. He's like, and he actually says, I'm just coming here to clear all this up for you. Like, guy has zero respect for the people that he manages somehow to have authority over. And he doesn't know what he's doing, but he also thinks he doesn't need to know what he's doing. Oh, it'll just work out fine. And he's just horrible. Here's the slightly more subtle thing. He's terrible to this female naval officer who's sort of assistant or secretary, possibly even. I'm not sure of her actual rank, to the captain on this base. The thing that was slightly subtle about it is he is so rude to her and so dismissive and like, I'll just have a light bit of meal, nothing too difficult. And then he makes this ridiculous breakfast order and he's like stopping her and be like, oh, fetch me a cup of tea. That's a good girl, and all this stuff. And you realize the captain of the base hasn't done any of that. When she raised concerns to him, even if he did not immediately take them on board, he addressed them and he treated her like someone who is good at this job and knows what she's doing and her thoughts have value. So not only do I appreciate Walker, the douchebag character, for, taking the piss out of that kind of person, but in addition to that, highlighting something that I hadn't properly appreciated, which was the dynamic between the captain and this woman who was assisting him, which was so much better and more respectful. So I appreciate that on multiple levels. And you might have noticed I'm not really talking too much about the Sea Devils themselves. So let's set aside their design. Their design is of its time. The movement is very limited. I kind of like that it's sort of got a turtle type face. I like that in general. It's cool, like seeing them come out of the ocean. That is cool.
But there's other things like they have them talk like this in these whispers. And like, they want it to sound off-putting and a little bit alien. I can't remember now if the Silurians talk like that. They might have, so it might also be a continuity thing. But they also talk slowly in addition to whispering, and I suspect that the slow talking has to do with how slow the mouth movement on the head was. If they talked any faster, it would have been so much more obvious that the lips on the headpieces could not keep up. But yeah, listening to them, that wasn't great. As I said, it is very much a retread of the Silurians. Now, to be fair, the core concept of the Silurians is something worth retreading. It's a concept, and especially the Doctor's approach to it, his first approach immediately being peace, and him getting annoyed basically with any and every military officer who either wants to or does fire on these things. But it still ultimately plays out in a very, very, very similar fashion. While these are themes and ideas worth revisiting, it is a retread pretty much across the board, just with the Master added in. And the Master is a great addition, but that doesn't change how much is recycled, except this time in water, as opposed to underground. Random note, there's a captain of a submarine. I forget the character's name. He stuck out to me initially because like he had an eye twitch that never came up, and like it wasn't like a precursor to like him going mad or anything like that, which is what I would have expected. And I found myself wondering, did the actor actually have an eye twitch? And I couldn't confirm that he did, but I did find out that actor was Donald Sumpter, who was the guy who played Rassilon in Hellbent, who was also in Game of Thrones. So that was just fun. You know what? I genuinely enjoy when Doctor Who, modern era Doctor Who, brings back actors from classics and not only like has them on again, but has them play decidedly different parts, like totally different tone, because, you know, this captain, he's resourceful and he is properly commanding, and he's thoughtful about the people under him. And then he played Rassilon, who's just so not that. I like when Doctor Who does that. So that was he's not an amazing performance in this, but he's solid. And once I realized that was him, I was like, oh, cool. I dig it. But the other thing is that the soundscape on this one is it's not great. So first of all, Doctor Who in general, and at this point in time in particular, the soundtrack, the music was very synth heavy, but it relied on a style of sound that I don't know what to call other than blarp. Blarp, 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 blarp. You know, it sounds like somebody farted into a synthesizer microphone. And they use those kinds of sounds in the soundtrack a lot. That got old quickly. There's more music in this than there really needs to be. And then there is the sound effects, because the Master and then later the Doctor are using these things with these sound waves and these signals to either call on or distract or in some way impede the Sea Devils. So there's often a lot of just noise, just like alarm sounding kind of noise going on top of the sound. The soundtrack score not being in something I care for. And like, I found myself like grimacing through some of the sounds and like how much of that kind of sound there was in this, which is an odd thing for me. That's not something that'll usually stand out to me so much that I feel the need to bring it up. But yeah, no, the sound on this was grating with this particular one. So I didn't particularly care for that. I suppose the other thing worth mentioning is there's some, especially for TV budget BBC at the time, some pretty decent, like, on the water filming going on. Like, and they've got hovercrafts, and it's impressive in a sense of scale that Doctor Who at this point in time didn't always have. And it brings that to the proceedings pretty well. I think shooting as much like on the open ocean and showing that as much as they did gave the whole story a much bigger, broader sense of things than the confined, clearly studio set caves of the Doctor Who and the Silurian story. So that was something I appreciated. So like there are little things about it that work better than the original Silurian story, but overall that whole element is just too much of a retread. And it's kind of been the Achilles heel of a lot of Silurian and or Sea Devil stories, which is that the creatures were designed to tell one pretty specific story. And the show's just kind of been retelling that story to various degrees ever since. I suppose like the one time that they really kind of deviated from that was Warriors of the Deep. And oh boy, check that video if you've never seen me talk about that. But overall, this is something that was worth revisiting, and I'm glad I watched it again. But the Master stuff is so much better and is also front-loaded because as is typical for Doctor Who monsters in this era, the Silurians don't really properly show up until second episode, and they don't really start kicking into gear until like the third or the fourth. So the first 2-3 episodes are very Master-focused, and they're just so much better. They're so much better than the rest of it, and it makes the other stuff look worse than it actually is, simply by comparison, because there's Delgado and Manning and Pertwee just ruling and being wonderful and great and fun and funny and charming. And then we have to get through the weird blarpy soundtrack and the annoying sound effects and the not great puppeteering of the heads of the Sea Devils as they work their way through a story that we've kind of already seen done before. Which is a shame. It doesn't make me any less excited for Legend of the Sea Devils to come out, because I do feel they are still worth bringing back to see what else you can do with them and to try and do them better. Visually, if nothing else. It's kind of like why, even though I'm not a huge fan of either Cold War or Empress of Mars, I still appreciate that New Who brought back the Ice Warriors and brought them up to date so that for Doctor Who viewers now, it's not just, something the old show did. It's something they have a reference for. And I want that treatment for the Sea Devils as well. So I'm still excited for it. It's also got pirates in it, so I'm a sucker for that. But that's me going off on something that isn't even out yet and I haven't seen yet. But I'll have my review out on that on the main Council of Geeks channel when that comes out. I assume anyone who follows me here also subscribes to me there, but, just in case. But in any case, we're going to wrap it up there. The Sea Devils. Classic Doctor Who. What'd you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Like, share, subscribe. Patreon is what pays the bills. And normally I would have had a poll on the Patreon to determine what classic Doctor Who story I was going to do. I didn't in this case because this was topical and relevant to something coming up. But in future, when it comes to classic Doctor Who, which I'm trying to get back on schedule to do one a month at least, you can vote for what ones I want to do, plus have a look at my docket, early access to the main channel videos, etc., etc. Any amount you're able to contribute helps, but don't sweat that too much, because we take a relaxed attitude around here. Like, share, subscribe, help me out as well, but ultimately, this is just a place for you to come back next time you need a break. And credits. I gotta shout out my top Patreon supporters, so thank you very much to Zubin Lutfullah, Tarak, Oliver B., Melinda Walters, Leotha Boyd, TT, Vernobulax the Poodle, Eidolon, Tracy Scrabbit, Vincent Paul Bartolucci, Angry Caspero, Adam Lefty Taylor, Shane Ross, Robin Moore, Shayla Gourlay, and Brendan LaRose. Couldn't do it without you.